Zaina was unlike most girls in her village. She was kind-hearted, intelligent, and carried a rare beauty that made people stop and admire her. But beyond her striking features, it was her spirit that truly set her apart. She had a fire in her heart, a longing for a life beyond the traditions that had bound generations of women before her. Her mother had once been her greatest protector, a woman of wisdom and strength who had showered her with love. But fate had been cruel. Zaina lost her mother when she was just a child, leaving a void in her heart that nothing could fill. Her father, devastated by grief, eventually remarried a woman named Mama Bahati. At first, Mama Bahati seemed kind. She would smile warmly and speak softly when her husband was around. But as time passed, Zaina saw her true face. When her father was away, Mama Bahati's kindness turned to cold indifference, then to open cruelty. She would assign Zaina the most difficult chores, making her fetch water from the farthest well, scrub the floors until her hands ached, and cook meals without ever being allowed to eat enough herself. Zaina bore it all silently, knowing that in their village, questioning elders was seen as disrespectful. The village itself was a place where tradition was law. Girls were expected to marry young, often to men they did not love or even know well. Their futures were decided for them, their choices ignored. It was the way things had always been. But Zaina dreamed of something different. She often watched the birds in the sky and wished for their freedom. She wanted to choose her own path, to build a life beyond the expectations placed upon her. But dreams were fragile things in a world where power belonged to men and those who obeyed them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky a deep orange, Zaina's life took a turn for the worse. Her father, who had always been strong and hard-working, suddenly fell ill. It wasn't a sickness that came gradually, it struck fast, leaving him weak and bedridden within days. The village healer tried herbs and prayers, but nothing seemed to work. And as her father grew weaker, Mama Bahati grew stronger. With Zaina's father unable to manage the household, Mama Bahati seized control. She made decisions without consulting him, took charge of the family's affairs, and began treating Zaina more harshly than ever. At first, Zaina believed her stepmother was simply taking advantage of the situation. But as days passed, a chilling thought crept into her mind: what if her father's illness wasn't natural? What if someone had made him sick? And worse, what if that someone was living under their very roof? The night was quiet, but Zaina could not sleep. The walls of their small hut felt like they were closing in, trapping her with an unease she couldn't shake. Something was wrong. Mama Bahati had been acting strangely for weeks, whispering with visitors, disappearing for long hours, returning with a smug look on her face. Her father's health had worsened. He lay on his mat, too weak to sit up, his breathing shallow. Zaina sat beside him, gently dabbing his forehead with a damp cloth. "Baba," she whispered, "you must eat." His fingers trembled as he tried to take the wooden bowl of soup she had prepared. He managed a sip before his hand fell back onto the mat, too weak to hold the bowl any longer. His eyes, clouded with exhaustion, flickered to hers. "Zaina, be careful," he whispered between labored breaths. "Something is not right." A shiver ran down her spine. What was he trying to tell her? Before she could ask, a loud knock at the door startled her. Mama Bahati entered, her smile tight, her eyes gleaming with something that made Zaina uneasy. "Go to sleep, Zaina. Tomorrow is a big day," she said in a tone that was too sweet, too forced. Zaina's heart pounded. A big day? What did she mean? That night, as she walked past Mama Bahati's hut, she heard hushed voices inside. She would have ignored them, until she caught a single word that made her stop in her tracks. Marriage. Zaina's breath caught in her throat. She pressed her back against the wall and listened. "This is a generous offer, Mama Bahati," came a deep, raspy voice. She knew that voice. Chief Cato. The name sent a chill through her. Chief Cato was the wealthiest and most powerful man in the village, but he was also feared. He had taken multiple wives over the years, yet none had stayed for long. Some had vanished without a trace, while others had been found dead under mysterious circumstances. You will not regret this decision, Chief Cato continued. The girl is young and strong. She will serve me well. Zaina's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. Mama Bahati's voice was smooth, like oil sliding over a sharp blade. Of course, Chief Cato. I have raised her well. She is obedient, hard-working. And in return, you have promised me gold, he interrupted. And land. You will be a wealthy woman, Mama Bahati. Zaina covered her mouth to keep from gasping. Her stepmother was selling her. Not out of love, not for her future, but for wealth. Tears burned her eyes, but she forced herself to stay silent. She had to think. She had to act. When Chief Cato finally left, Zaina ran to her father's hut. He was barely conscious, but she gripped his hand tightly. Baba, you must stop this. Mama Bahati wants to marry me off to Chief Cato. His eyes widened in alarm. He struggled to sit up, his body trembling from weakness. No. I won't allow it. He tried to call for Mama Bahati, but his voice was barely above a whisper. Zaina clenched her fists. Baba, you have to stop her. Before she could finish, the door swung open. Mama Bahati stood there, arms crossed, a smirk playing at her lips. It is done, child, she said coolly. Tomorrow, the village will celebrate your engagement. Zaina's chest tightened. No. I won't do it. Mama Bahati took a step closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think you have a choice? She let out a soft chuckle. The village believes in tradition, Zaina. You are a girl. Your fate is not yours to decide. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Zaina shaking with rage. The next morning, Zaina's worst nightmare came true. Mama Bahati announced the engagement. The village erupted in celebration. Women sang, children danced, and men clapped Chief Cato on the back, congratulating him on his young, beautiful bride. Zaina stood frozen as people congratulated her, their faces beaming with joy. Didn't they see? Didn't they understand that she was terrified? She turned, searching the crowd for anyone who might help her. But all she saw were smiling faces. No one saw the fear in her eyes. No one would save her. And that was when she realized the awful truth. If she wanted to escape this fate, she would have to save herself. The village was alive with celebration. Torches burned brightly, casting golden light over the dancing villagers. Drums pounded in a rhythmic beat, voices sang songs of joy, and laughter echoed in the night air. But for Zaina, this was not a night of happiness. She sat in the corner of her father's hut, knees pulled to her chest. Her father's weak breathing filled the silence between the drum beats. His once strong hands now trembled, his eyes barely able to stay open. Zaina's heart ached as she placed a damp cloth on his forehead. Baba, I don't know what to do, she whispered. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, struggling to focus on her. His lips parted as if he wanted to say something, but no words came. Tears welled in Zaina's eyes. If only her father were strong, he would never allow this marriage. He would fight for her. But he was too weak. Outside, the villagers celebrated her upcoming wedding, unaware of the storm raging inside her. She couldn't marry Chief Cato. She couldn't let Mama Bahati win. She had to do something. Taking a deep breath, Zaina rose to her feet. She wrapped a dark shawl around her shoulders and slipped out into the night. The cool air filled her lungs as she hurried through the narrow pathways of the village. She had one chance to stop this, and she knew exactly where to go. The Elders' Council. The elders were the wisest men and women in the village. They made decisions for the good of the people. If they understood how cruel this marriage was, they could stop it. She reached their gathering hut and knocked softly. A long moment passed before the door creaked open, revealing Elder Kwesi, the oldest of the council. His wrinkled face, lit only by the flickering fire inside, looked surprised. Zaina? Why are you here so late? I need to speak with you. Please, it's urgent. With a sigh, he stepped aside, letting her enter. The other elders sat in a circle around the fire, their tired faces watching her curiously. Zaina fell to her knees. Please, you must stop this wedding, she pleaded. The elders exchanged glances. Child, what is the matter? Asked Elder Quasi. My stepmother is selling me to Chief Cato, Zaina said, her voice shaking. She is doing this for gold, not for my happiness. Chief Cato, he is not a good man. You must know the stories. His wives disappear. I will not be safe. The room fell silent. Some elders looked at each other, their expressions unreadable. Finally, Elder Quasi sighed. Zaina, we understand your fear. But Chief Cato is powerful. If we refuse him, it could bring danger to the village. Zaina's stomach turned. So you will do nothing? An older woman, Elder Sephu, reached for Zaina's hand. Child, you are not the first girl to be married this way. Many before you have faced this. It is tradition. Zaina pulled her hand away. So tradition is more important than my life? The elders lowered their heads, unwilling to meet her gaze. Her heart shattered. They weren't going to help. She rose to her feet, her fists clenched. I see now. You are afraid of him. And because of that, I am alone. Without another word, she turned and rushed out of the hut. Tears blurred her vision as she ran through the village, her mind racing. If the elders wouldn't help, who would? Then a name came to her. Ao. Ao had been her childhood friend. He was a hunter, strong and fearless, and he had always been there for her. If anyone could help her now, it was him. She found him in the clearing where he often trained with his bow. He was sharpening his knife, his dark eyes focused. When he saw her, his expression shifted to concern. Zaina? What's wrong? She collapsed beside him, gasping for breath. It's happening, Ao. They are forcing me to marry Chief Cato. Ao's hands clenched around the knife. What? She told him everything, Mama Bahati's betrayal, the elders' refusal to help, her father's illness. Ao listened in silence, his jaw tightening with every word. Then he spoke. Run away with me. Zaina's breath caught. What? I know the forest better than anyone. I can take you far away from here. You'll be safe. Zaina's heart swelled at his offer. But then she thought of her father, lying weak and helpless. I can't, she whispered. Baba needs me. If I leave, Mama Bahati will let him die. Ao exhaled sharply. Then what will you do? You can't marry him, Zaina. I won't, she said. But I need to fight from within. I need to find a way to expose Chief Cato. Ao frowned. How? I don't know yet. But I will find something, proof that he is dangerous. If I can convince the village, they will have no choice but to stop the wedding. Ao was silent for a long moment, then nodded. Then I'll help you. Relief flooded her. She wasn't alone. That night, Zaina started gathering information. She listened closely whenever people spoke of Chief Cato. She paid attention to the whispers, the warnings, the unspoken fears. And what she uncovered made her blood run cold. There were stories of missing wives, of young girls who had gone with him and never returned. Zaina's hands trembled as she pieced the truth together. She had little time. The wedding was days away. She needed proof. And she needed it fast. Because if she failed, she would be next. The morning sun rose over the village, casting golden hues over the thatched roofs and dusty paths. But for Zaina, there was no warmth in the light. Today was the day she had dreaded most, her wedding day. Her heart pounded in her chest as Mama Bahati and a group of women dressed her in fine silk. Gold bangles clinked on her wrists, and a heavy necklace sat around her neck, weighing her down like chains. The scent of crushed flowers and burning incense filled the hut, making her stomach turn. Mama Bahati stood behind her, adjusting her headpiece. "You should be grateful, girl," she whispered. "Chief Cato is a rich man. You will never go hungry." Zaina clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay silent. She could not show her anger, not yet. Outside, the sound of drums and singing grew louder as villagers gathered to celebrate. Men danced, children laughed, and women carried baskets of food toward the ceremonial grounds. When the time came, Mama Bahati grabbed Zaina's arm and pulled her toward the waiting crowd. She felt like a prisoner being led to her execution. Chief Cato stood at the center of the celebration, dressed in fine robes. He was an older man, with graying hair and sharp, calculating eyes. He grinned when he saw Zaina, as if she were a prize he had won. "Ah, my beautiful bride," he said loudly, his voice dripping with pride. "Today, I take my fifth wife." The villagers cheered. Zaina's stomach twisted. Fifth wife. She had spent the past nights gathering information, and the truth haunted her. His previous wives had vanished without a trace. What had happened to them? As the elder began the wedding rites, Zaina's hands grew cold. She could feel Ao watching from the crowd. He had wanted her to run, but she had chosen this path, to fight from within. The ceremony ended, and the feast began. Large pots of stew bubbled, roasted meat filled the air with its rich aroma, and fresh fruits were laid out in abundance. People ate, danced, and drank palm wine, celebrating the union. Zaina forced herself to smile as she sat beside Chief Cato. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she knew this was her chance. She took a cup of palm wine and deliberately spilled it on Chief Cato's robes. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Zaina widened her eyes in mock horror. "Oh! Forgive me, my husband," she said sweetly, bowing her head. Chief Cato's expression darkened for a moment, but then he chuckled. "You are clumsy, my dear wife. But I will forgive you this once." The villagers laughed, and the moment passed. But Zaina had not spilled the drink by accident. She had done it to test him, to see how quick he was to anger. And she had seen it. For a moment, there had been something dangerous in his eyes. Night fell, and the celebrations ended. The villagers returned to their homes, and Chief Cato led Zaina to his grand house on the edge of the village. It was larger than any other house, built of strong wood and decorated with carvings of powerful warriors. Servants bowed as they passed, but their eyes were filled with fear. Inside, the house was dimly lit, the flickering flames casting shadows along the walls. Chief Cato showed her to her new chamber. It was decorated beautifully, with a soft bed and fine cloths, but Zaina felt no comfort. As Chief Cato left the room, she noticed a door at the end of the hallway. It was different from the others, larger, made of dark wood, with strange symbols carved into it. Zaina's heart raced. Something about that door filled her with unease. She knew she had to find out what was behind it. But first, she had to be careful. She took a deep breath and lay down on the soft bed, forcing herself to appear calm. She needed to pretend, to act like the perfect obedient wife. Until she found a way to uncover Chief Cato's secrets. The house was eerily silent. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, and distant animal cries echoed through the night. But inside, within the thick wooden walls of Chief Cato's grand home, the silence was heavy, dangerous. Zaina lay motionless on the bed, listening intently. Chief Cato's deep, steady breathing from the other room told her he was finally asleep. Her heart pounded. This was her chance. Slowly, she slid out from under the thick covers. The cold floor sent a shiver up her spine, but she didn't stop. Moving as silently as the night itself, she stepped toward the door. Her fingers trembled as she pushed it open just enough to slip through. The hallway was dimly lit by a few flickering oil lamps. Shadows danced along the walls, making everything seem more sinister. The forbidden chamber. Zaina's eyes locked onto the dark wooden door at the end of the hall. The strange symbols carved into it looked even more ominous under the dim light. She held her breath as she approached, her heart pounding in her chest. Every step felt heavier. She reached out, running her fingers over the carvings. What was behind this door? She tested the handle. Locked. Her stomach twisted in frustration. There has to be a way in. Glancing around, she spotted a bunch of keys on a wooden shelf nearby. Swallowing her fear, she took them and tried one after another. The third key clicked. The door creaked open. Zaina hesitated, then stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Darkness. She took a deep breath and fumbled for an oil lamp on the nearest table. When she lit it, the dim glow illuminated the room, and Zaina's blood ran cold. Old belongings, shoes, dresses, jewelry, scattered across the floor. Everything was covered in dust, as if untouched for years. She stepped forward, her pulse racing. She recognized them. These were the belongings of the previous wives. The wives that had disappeared. A deep dread settled in her bones as she moved further inside. On a small wooden table, letters lay scattered. The ink was smudged, the paper worn. With trembling hands, she picked one up. To anyone who finds this, please know that I did not leave by choice. He is not who he pretends to be. I tried to escape, but I fear I won't make it. If you are reading this, be careful, he will not let you go either. Zaina's breath hitched. She grabbed another letter. He is watching me. I hear whispers at night. I know what happened to the others. I will try to escape tonight. If I fail, know that he is a monster. Zaina's fingers curled around the paper as a chill crawled up her spine. She turned to a wooden chest near the far corner of the room. Something inside her screamed not to open it. But she had to. Her hands shook as she lifted the lid. Blood. Dried, dark stains covered old clothing. The fabrics were torn, ripped violently as if someone had fought back. Among the clothes lay small trinkets, bracelets, hair combs, beads. Zaina's stomach lurched. He killed them. All of them. The wives had never run away. They had never left. He murdered them. And now, she was next. She staggered back, her breathing ragged. Fear clawed at her throat, but she forced herself to think. She needed proof. She needed to escape. Her hands darted to the letters, she tucked them inside her dress. Next, she grabbed a small bracelet with dried blood on it, evidence of his crimes. Suddenly, the wooden floor creaked outside. Zaina's heart nearly stopped. Footsteps. He was awake. She had to leave. Now. She blew out the lamp and rushed toward the door, pressing her ear against it. The footsteps paused, then continued past the chamber. Holding her breath, she carefully slipped out, closing the door behind her. She had the proof. But would she make it out alive? Zaina's breath came in short, panicked gasps as she crept down the hallway, clutching the blood-stained bracelet and letters to her chest. Every shadow seemed to move, every whisper of the wind felt like a warning. She had to escape. Now. The front door was just ahead. If she could reach it. A floorboard creaked behind her. She froze. A chilling voice sliced through the darkness. Going somewhere, my dear wife? Zaina spun around, and her heart stopped. Chief Cato stood there, his dark eyes glinting under the dim torchlight. His face, once smooth with smug confidence, was now twisted in fury. In his right hand, he clutched a curved hunting knife. Zaina stepped back, her fingers tightening around the letters hidden inside her dress. She forced herself to stay calm, though fear coiled around her throat like a snake. I know what you did, she said, her voice steady despite the terror inside her. Chief Cato tilted his head, amused. Oh? I found the chamber, she continued, her heart hammering. I saw the letters. The clothes. The blood. Something flickered in his eyes, something dark, something proud. Then, he laughed. A deep, cruel laugh that sent shivers down her spine. Ah, so you finally know the truth, he said, stepping forward. I was wondering how long it would take. Zaina forced herself to stay still, though her body screamed for her to run. You killed them, she accused, her voice shaking now. All of them. Your wives never ran away. You murdered them. Chief Cato smiled. And who'll believe you, he said softly. The village? The same people who celebrated your marriage today? The same ones who would rather turn a blind eye than challenge me? Zaina's stomach twisted. He was right. The village feared him. No one would dare go against him unless she had proof. She clutched the letters tighter, taking a slow step back. You won't get away with this, she whispered. Chief Cato sighed, shaking his head. You disappoint me, Zaina. I thought you would be smarter than the others. His grip tightened on the knife. I suppose I will have to make sure you don't become a problem. He lunged. Zaina barely had time to react. She twisted to the side, but the blade slashed across her upper arm. Pain shot through her, hot and sharp, but she didn't stop. With a burst of adrenaline, she grabbed a wooden torch from the wall and swung it at him. The fire whooshed through the air, missing him by inches. Chief Cato growled in frustration and came at her again. But Zaina was faster. She grabbed a clay water jug from a nearby shelf and hurled it at him. It shattered against his chest, sending him stumbling back with a roar of anger. That was her chance. Zaina turned and ran. Her bare feet pounded against the wooden floor as she darted toward the door. She threw it open and bolted into the night. The cold air bit at her wounded arm, but she didn't stop. Behind her, she heard him scream her name in fury. The chase had begun. The village was silent. Everyone was asleep, unaware of the deadly hunt happening in the darkness. Zaina sprinted through the narrow pathways, her breath ragged. She had nowhere to hide. The fields? No. Too open. The river? Too far. The forest. She veered toward the dense trees at the edge of the village. If she could lose him there, she might have a chance. Behind her, she heard the pounding of heavy footsteps. He was getting closer. Her legs burned, but she pushed forward. 1 step. 2 steps. The forest was near. Then, a rough hand grabbed her wrist. She screamed as Chief Cato yanked her back, slamming her against a tree. You think you can run from me? He hissed, his breath hot against her face. Zaina struggled, kicking and thrashing, but his grip was iron. His knife gleamed under the moonlight. This is where your story ends, he whispered. Terror flooded her veins. She had to think fast. Then, she remembered the bracelet. The proof. Summoning all her strength, she lifted her injured arm and smashed the blood-stained bracelet against his face. Chief Cato flinched. And that was all she needed. Zaina shoved him with all her might. He stumbled backward, his foot slipping on the damp grass. Before he could regain balance, she turned and ran. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Her only hope now was to find someone who would listen. Someone who would believe her. And before Chief Cato caught up to her again, she had to make the entire village hear the truth. Zaina ran through the dark village, her breath coming in sharp, painful gasps. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but she pushed forward. Her wounded arm throbbed, and blood trickled down her sleeve, but she ignored it. She had to reach Ao's house. The village was still asleep, unaware of the monster that had been living among them. The truth burned inside her chest, desperate to be set free. Bang! 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 Zaina pounded on Ao's door with all the strength she had left. Ao! Please! Open up, she pleaded. For a terrifying moment, there was silence. Then, the wooden door creaked open slightly, and a familiar face peered out. Ao's eyes widened when he saw her, her torn clothes, the wound on her arm, the sheer terror in her eyes. Zaina, he whispered. What happened? No time, please, let me in. Without hesitation, Ao pulled her inside and shut the door behind her. His mother and father, still drowsy from sleep, looked at Zaina in shock. "My child, what happened?" Ao's mother asked, hurrying to fetch a cloth for her wound. Zaina tried to catch her breath. "It's Chief Cato. He killed them. His wives. I found the proof. He tried to kill me too." Ao's father frowned. "Are you certain?" "I have the letters," she whispered, pulling them from her dress. "And this." She held up the blood-stained bracelet. The room fell silent. Then, a loud knock at the door. "Open this door now." Zaina's blood turned to ice. "Chief Cato." The knock turned into pounding. "I know she's in there." His voice was thunderous, filled with rage. "She is my wife, and she has lost her mind. She ran away in the night, screaming nonsense." Ao exchanged a glance with his father. His mother quickly pulled Zaina into the shadows, hiding her behind a curtain. Ao's father took a deep breath, then unlatched the door. Chief Cato stormed in, his clothes still stained from the chase. His chest rose and fell in fury. "Where is she?" His eyes darted around the room. Ao's father folded his arms. "Why are you looking for her, Chief?" "She ran away from my home, accusing me of terrible things," he growled. "The girl is clearly not well." Ao stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Or maybe she's telling the truth." Chief Cato's gaze snapped to him, dark and dangerous. "Mind your tongue, boy." Ao didn't flinch. "Where are your other wives, Chief Cato?" The room fell silent. Chief Cato let out a forced laugh. "They left. Every single one of them." "Why does it matter?" "Then why do you keep their things locked away in a secret chamber?" The words sent a ripple of unease through the small crowd forming outside. People were waking up. The villagers had heard the shouting, and now they gathered, murmuring among themselves. Zaina stepped forward. Gasps spread through the crowd. She lifted the letters high in the air. "I have proof," she shouted. "Your beloved chief is a murderer." Chief Cato's eyes darkened with pure hatred. "You are a foolish girl." Zaina took a step closer, her voice rising with strength. "These are letters from his past wives, desperate messages, begging for help. I found their belongings, their clothes, stained with their blood." She held up the bracelet, and a woman in the crowd gasped. "That belonged to my sister," she whispered. She married Chief Cato years ago. She never came back." The villagers murmured louder. Doubt was creeping into their hearts. Zaina's heart pounded as she turned to the crowd. "He lies. He tells you they left, but they never did. They tried to escape, just like I did. And he killed them." An elder stepped forward, his wrinkled face filled with suspicion. "Chief Cato, years ago, my niece married you. We never heard from her again. You told us she abandoned you. But now," he looked at the letters in Zaina's hands. "Now, I wonder." Chief Cato clenched his jaw. "This is nonsense." Another woman spoke up. "My cousin married him too, and we never saw her again." More villagers whispered among themselves. More memories of missing women resurfaced. The fear in their eyes slowly turned to anger. Chief Cato saw it, he knew he was losing control. He turned sharply. "Enough of this," he roared. "She is lying. This girl is trying to turn you against me." Zaina stepped forward boldly. "Then why did you try to kill me last night?" A sharp murmur ran through the crowd. The elder narrowed his eyes. "Chief Cato, did you harm this girl?" "I." Before he could respond, a hand grabbed his wrist. It was Mama Bahati. She forced a nervous smile and turned to the crowd. "This is all a misunderstanding. Zaina is just upset about the marriage. She is making up stories to cause trouble." Zaina glared at her. "You sold me to him for gold." The villagers gasped. Mama Bahati's face paled. "Enough." The elder's voice was heavy with authority. We must search his home. If this girl is lying, we will know. Chief Cato took a slow step back. Then another. His hand moved toward the knife on his belt. Ao's eyes widened. He's going to run. But before Chief Cato could turn, the villagers surged forward. Hands grabbed him, pulling him down. The once mighty chief was thrown to the ground, surrounded by the very people who had once feared him. Zaina watched as they dragged him toward the village square, toward justice. Tears burned in her eyes, but this time, they were not of fear. They were of victory. The village square was filled with the voices of justice. Chief Cato, once feared and respected, now sat bound in the center of the crowd. The elders stood before him, their faces etched with anger and disappointment. The evidence was undeniable. The letters, the blood-stained clothes, and the missing women, all pointed to one truth. Chief Cato was a murderer. The elders spoke with finality. For your crimes against innocent women, for the lives you have stolen, you will face the punishment of our ancestors. The villagers erupted in agreement. There was no place for a man like him among them. His wealth and power could no longer protect him. Mama Bahati, who had once ruled over Zaina's home with cruelty, cowered at the edge of the crowd. But she was not forgotten. You betrayed your own family, the elder told her. You sold an innocent girl for gold. You poisoned your own husband. You are banished from this village. From this day forward, you are nothing to us. Tears streamed down Mama Bahati's face, but the villagers turned their backs on her. She had no choice but to flee into the wilderness, disappearing from their lives forever. With her gone, something miraculous happened. Zaina's father began to recover. The village healer examined him and shook his head. There was poison in his body, slowly weakening him. But now, he will heal. Zaina knelt beside her father, tears in her eyes. Baba, you're going to be okay. He took her hands in his, guilt and sorrow in his expression. My daughter. I failed you. She shook her head. No, Baba. We were both trapped. But now, we are free. And free she was. For the first time in her life, Zaina had control over her own destiny. Ao, who had stood beside her through everything, took a deep breath. Zaina. I have loved you for as long as I can remember. Her heart swelled with gratitude for him, for his kindness, for his courage. But she smiled gently and shook her head. Ao. I love my freedom more. There was no anger in his eyes, only understanding. He smiled, stepping back. Then live, Zaina. Live the life you always dreamed of. And she did. The village had changed. Women were no longer forced into unwanted marriages. They were given the right to choose, to live, to be heard. Zaina had fought for herself, but in doing so, she had changed everything. As she stood at the edge of the village, feeling the warm sun on her face, she knew her journey was just beginning. She had survived the darkness. Now, she would embrace the light.